Hi everyone, I'm back with another video from the Season 5 PTR, this time about the Companion Druid. This build is looking really strong for Season 5 thanks to some buffs and reworks of existing aspects and the introduction of a new one, the Moon Range aspect. So in general, the Companion Druids have leveled up quite a bit and they are quite competitive. What you see here is a tier 110 pit, and this is a very unoptimized setup. I have like 4 out of 12 masterworks, basically no greater affixes, not really even the aspects maxed out. So this can get a lot better than this. I was also really scuffed what I was doing here, basically. And well, it does have some pretty serious damage output. So these wolves are your main carry in the setup, and you see here we have all the companions on the bar. This is different from what most of the other Druid builds will be doing these days, because in the past we had the Shepherd's aspect that basically forced most Druid builds to run triple companions, but they were only kind of cosmetic to give you that aspect buff. But now this aspect gives you a damage buff to your companions as well, and it's a pretty powerful one. On top of this, you can just summon more companions now thanks to the Moon Range aspect, and overall this is like a much better package with like those wolves. Just, you know, have more of them, they auto attack pretty fast, they hit for potentially millions, even dozens of millions of damage once this is optimized. And then you have this active ability of the wolves that just makes them all like fly in with the Storm's Companion, and they do like a big burst in like a small area. I see like these lightning zaps here. This is this effect. On top of this, we have the Poison Creeper that can do a bit of AoE damage here, which is nice. Currently on the PTR, the Poison Creeper is a bit buggy, and you might have seen that with like a trillion hit or something. But that is, I'm not sure where exactly it's coming from. I haven't really been able to pinpoint that bug just yet. But it's not carried by the Poison Creeper alone. This is the wolves mostly doing most of the damage, and occasionally the Poison Creeper doing some weird stuff, basically. But not very often. Either way, it is looking pretty good for the Companion Druids, and I think this is going to be one of the main builds for the season, outside of other major buffs to other builds. Now there are some other builds as well. For example, the Landslide or Stormslide builds, they are pretty powerful as well. And of course the recently buffed Polarizer is there, Windshear is there, so there's more options if you don't want to play with just the pets. But it is definitely a much more viable option now. So that's really cool about it. In addition, another cool thing about this build is that it has really high boss damage. It's kind of like a general weakness, I guess, of the Companion Druid, that it doesn't really have great AoE clear. So getting through a pit is not really the fastest. It's not really like a super speed farming build or something like that. But when it comes to the boss, it does have some pretty serious damage output here. And even like a 110 boss you can kill in sub 1 minute or something like that, which is fairly solid for what I just explained as a really scuffed setup here that I was playing. So that is looking really good. The boss fights are somewhat easy. And for example, for tormented bosses, if you want to farm those, this could be a really good setup as well. And I think in general, it's going to do just all right in the next season. So this is the setup that I was playing here. This is pretty classic from what I already had from like Season 4. There's not really too many things that have really changed here outside of just like generic buffs and a few of the learnings that we had with Storm's Companion. One thing you need to know about this pair of pants is that it does give your wolves a lot of extra attacks on the skills. So when you look at the tooltip in the game, it says nature magic and werewolf and a storm skill and all those kind of things. But actually what we learned from testing, also thanks to Eva and Boiler that told me about this, is that basically nothing of that works. So what you need to understand about the Companion Druid, if in case you're trying to tweak the setup a little bit, is that anything that is not very generic does usually not work for the companions, or only the stuff that specifically calls out companions or specifically calls out the wolves does work. So what this means in practice is that a lot of the different effects they could pick up here on the Paragon boards or even on your legendary items or something don't really apply to the wolves at all. And this is something to be aware of. So for example, if you have certain glyphs here that say like Fang and Claw, you might be wondering why is this not in a setup. It says while in werewolf or werebear form, close enemies take increased damage from you. Well, this does not apply to the pets for some reason. Most of the kind of generic effects do apply. So for example, damage stats like critical strike damage, attack speed, critical strike chance, like willpower, all these things do apply, but more specific conditional effects usually do not, unless they specifically say, for example, here the keeper glyph, it says you and your companions deal increased non-physical damage, for example, and these kind of things. So that's kind of what I need to know. Also, for example, because these tags are not working, for example, if you put certain like werewolf specific stats, like here werewolf attack speed, you would think, oh, this definitely works for the pets, right? They are actually werewolves thanks to the alpha aspect. But no, that's not happening. So this doesn't work, this doesn't work. So there's a lot of like kind of missing synergies here that we could use to buff up those pets a little bit more if they were working properly. However, this is not the case. The same applies to, for example, as well, some of these passives here. Like, for example, they become nature magic skills. Like, the skill literally has a nature magic tag in the game when you have the Storm's Companion pants equipped. But, for example, even Defiance doesn't work, Resonance doesn't work, all this stuff doesn't work. So, TLDR, all the extra tags that the skill gets added from those aspects and from the pants, they don't do anything, basically. So that's what you need to know. And this is why maybe some of the choices look a bit weird, because simply a lot of things don't really apply here. Now, there's a chance that Blizzard might fix this. Even without any kind of fixes, the Companion Druids do look at least alright. And maybe we're gonna see some of those updates happening and maybe more stuff working with the wolves so that we can actually level them up even further. But even without it, I had a pretty good time playing that. So you spam the wolves, we can get a lot of cooldown reduction here for our wolves. You see this here, we have 43% cooldown reduction for the wolves here, here, and here. That's actually too much. You don't need that much because the maximum cooldown reduction for a skill is 75%. If you have 2 of these rolls kind of maxed out, you're getting pretty close to that already. And for example, the last one could be also something else. But I guess for most people, it is not that realistic, at least early on, to get to the point where you have 75% from just 2. So I'd rather just put 3 here in the planner. And of course, also getting an amulet like this here is really tough. So this is something to work towards for a long time. But this is just the planner gear, basically. That's what it looks like with the stuff that you want to get here. One nice thing that also that they've added is Earthen Bulwark now is a lot better than before. So this now works with your maximum life instead of your base life. So you can actually have like a basically permanent bulwark with a really good absorb here for your barriers. And we can also put, for example, Earthen Bulwark duration, Earthen Bulwark cooldown as our defensive tempers. I really like that combo because you can get easy fortify, you can get easy unstoppable, and you just have this all the time. So you can just stay in combat and you are unstoppable as long as they don't take a lot of damage. If the barrier breaks, the unstoppable is lost. So you can still get CC'd and die if that happens. But overall, it felt relatively safe, relatively tanky with the setup that I made here. So you're kind of just like smacking away with Claw and Pulverize. Pulverize also giving us some extra damage reduction, for example. There's another kind of way to flip the 2 skills, where you have the Maul as your bear skill and then Shred as your wolf skill. So you want to have one way or the other, basically, so you can transform between wolf and bear at will to get the buffs from Bestial Rampage. Need to make sure they keep up this buff here, because this not only gives you 30% attack speed and 50% damage, but it applies twice to the companions thanks to the Wild Rage aspect here. So this is extremely powerful, and you want to make sure that you play around this combo. So it's very easy to stay in one form for 2 seconds and then a little bit harder to stay in the other form for the other 2 seconds, but you just have to kind of like keep that in mind and muscle memory it a little bit, and then it's not too bad. And of course, you want to keep up quick shifting. So quick shifting is the name of the game for druids in general. Every 8 seconds you want to shift, which is easy to do since every time you press wolves, you transform back into human form, and then every time you attack, you transform back. So this is very easy to do. In fact, for example, here in the planner, that I didn't even play with this. I didn't have one of these pair of boots, but Wild Heart Hunger is technically the best DPS option here. That gives you another 30% extra damage, and you have to shift once every 5 seconds. But again, because the wolf's cooldown is so low, you kind of do that naturally, and it's very easy to keep this buff up. But there are other options here. You can just put normal boots. For example, I was running with Metamorphosis or Hectic, these kind of things. There's a few options here for utility options, or even speed options if you want. If you want to go at movement speed cap, for example, for a bit more of a speed farming focused setup, then you don't have to bother with the 5-second shifting. You can just do the 8 seconds, and it's much more convenient. Either way, it's looking pretty good for the companion druids, so there's more to come. I will make like a full build guide for this once the time comes, once you have the final patch notes, but I think for now, this is like a little overview here that I can give you, and it was just working basically right off the bat. And I think this is also something that if you really like the companions, you can play from quite early on in the game, because at least in the early game, the companions actually have a relatively large damage impact. And then you can start stacking up those glyphs once you're level 50, get the keeper glyph, for example, which is a big companion glyph. and a bunch of other effects. Like the aspects are all really powerful. So it has a lot of like kind of damage by default once you get those pieces together. And it's definitely thinkable to just play this basically from level 1 if you really want to. So if you're looking for something like that, then good news for you. And that's also it for this video here. So hope you enjoyed my little overview. I have more stuff coming. I also tried out more things on the Druid and all the other classes. So stay tuned for those. Hope you enjoyed this video and see you guys next time.